feel like Brian has something he wants to say.
I actually want to ask a question of the other panelists, particularly in academia, because I'm having been about halfway through Liveworx now. I've had, I don't know, 10 or so customer meetings so far. And most of them have been, I would summarize most of them by saying the customer walks in the room and says, I have a strategy to do what I just saw in the keynote. They want digital transformation. They want, and when you start unwrapping that, I'm getting to my question, I promise. When you start unwrapping that, you realize that the motivation for the customer is so that they can continue to compete in today's world, so that they can maintain their competitive edge or potentially grow in markets that they're not able to compete in today because they have some sort of limitation that digital transformation will help them improve upon. And what I'm curious about in the academic world is that notion of what ultimately is holding the teams back. When you say you've spent 5 years trying to make this happen, I think, in a competitive sense, if students and parents recognized the differentiation of the curriculum at Purdue, there might be more of an interest in students going there and taking advantage of what they see is a transformative way of thinking about teaching, frankly, product delivery in the modern world to the market. I'm curious if there's a competitive context to what you're trying to do, and does the very senior leadership at the university recognize the need to transform in order to sort of maintain relevance in the academic world? I'm just, because that's what I'm hearing from our customers, that they need to do it to compete. I'm curious if the university sort of sees it that way as well. At least in some sense. I'm
going to add a follow-on question to that, actually, as you were speaking earlier, Yuri, about how, any more computer engineering, all these different disciplines are becoming embedded across the different levels. How do the students respond to these changes in the curriculum and in what they're seeing? So I'm going to tack that on to the end of Brian's question.
I should probably not answer my own question.
In fact, I really appreciate the arguments of Barry on the example and good ideas, and it's the same way during Liveworx with the demo, and then your customers are seeing what others are doing, and it pushes themselves to have good questions and to look forward, and they plan some new ideas and so on and so on. In Europe, PTC and other industrial and companies create in Aachen University of Technology the European 4.0 Transformation Center, and it's an amazing example of technologies and demo, and you can test and assess new technologies, IoT, augmented reality, and so on and so on. And we were there in past October, right? And it's give me the idea to bring some people from the north of France, half academics, half people from industry who are interested in what we call that in France industrie du futur, but it's industry 4.0. It's, we always need the new market by myself. Then it's very interesting that all people apply and agree to attend this visit in July to be able to see the good example in Aachen. And then it's the way of doing things. And in Liveworx, it's the same things with the demo from Volvo Trucks or with the demo from Beneteau and others, and all the Rockwell platform. It's very good, definitely, example to be able to develop new ideas.
Yuri or Gary, do you want to respond to Brian's question?
If I get started, I won't stop. So I don't know if I'm looking at Yuri.
Better go now, Yuri.
So I'm going to try and answer Brian's question, and I'll start it with something a little bit funny. So I'm a dean. So the definition of a dean, if you don't know it, is it's very similar to a cemetery caretaker. there's plenty of people below you, but no one's listening, okay? And unless you understand academia, you don't understand the difficulty in making change, because at least in the US, academia is really, the place is run by the faculty. They have all power. I had an incident this spring where a faculty probably wrongly flunked a graduating senior in a course, and I could do nothing about it because I cannot change a grade. It's all in the faculty's domain. Now, this is especially at research-intensive universities, and all the big names around the country. It's all done that way, and so somehow you have to get to the point of getting faculty to understand that the world has also fundamentally changed for them. Faculty have been trained to be experts. That's why they stand up and lecture, because they know all there is to know. So one of our faculty a few years ago decided to look online on his particular junior course on the teaching materials that he covered, the topics that he covered, and he found out that for free you could get 95% of what he was teaching in his course online. And suddenly the light bulb went off. It's like, okay, so what value do I bring? And so we have to get in the minds of faculty that they are no longer the experts, although they may be in their particular area of research, which is very narrow, but in many cases that doesn't translate to a freshman course in engineering very well. They have to start thinking themselves as coaches and mentors. And so although my comments might sound a little bit depressing, I'm actually very optimistic, because we think we're starting to figure this out at Purdue and elsewhere. The real challenge is getting faculty to think differently about what their role is in higher education, and then overlaying that with the learning theory that we've discovered over the last 50 to 80 years, and overlaying that into what it is you're trying to teach, and look at things not from a siloed 3-credit-hour perspective, but as an entire curriculum or an 8-semester experience around industry sectors like advanced manufacturing or the construction industry or the aviation industry, and take a systems thinking approach and seeing how you can then coordinate those activities, what we call both horizontally and vertically. So it is a huge transformation, okay? And that's what's taking so long, is trying to figure out how we actually change higher education in a very, very fundamental way. You mentioned leadership is extremely important. I literally, in my first few years as dean, trying to get our college to change, I had faculty that were basically ready to do a vote of no confidence in me. Well, the president of the university said, I'm not listening to that. You can vote all you want, but Gary's staying, okay? And, so we have a president that's all on board with this, as well as a board of trustees. And so from the very top, they gave me the cover I needed in order to do the right thing. And so you have to have that in the system, and you have to have great, strong leadership in order to make something like that happen. And you're seeing more and more higher education institutions in the United States turning away from academics being their president or chancellor, and bringing in people with other kinds of experiences, because they need different kinds of thinking. That, not to say you can't have an academic do it. Arizona State, Michael Crow is a good example of someone who's come from academia and is really doing a lot of cool things. But it's a systemic problem. And so, again, when you look at it from an industry perspective, you have to think of it that way. And in some ways, it's the same with industry. There's some that are slow to adopt this idea, right? So, it goes both ways. So be patient, look for those institutions that really want to make a difference and really, really get behind them. And I'd urge you to, instead of spreading yourself so thin, focus in on some signature programs around the world and see if you can make a real difference.
Thank you. Yuri.
Yeah, so it's a great question, Brian, and Gary addressed some of the real challenges that we have at the university. It's wonderful when you have a board of administration and a dean on board to be able to do this. And it sounds like Gary's extremely blessed in that way. I know we're blessed at BYU to have a dean that's very much in favor of being able to engage the digital transformation. It's been very, very helpful. But I don't think the challenge that we face at the university is unique to the university. In all of my meeting with industry over the years, large corporations suffer from the same internal arrogance that the academic perspective does. And that's that we're doing things right, we're leading already, and we don't need to make that kind of a change. And I think that's one of the transformations is that we're seeing is that no longer can the status quo that we are the leader be enough. We have to be able to adapt to the fact that technology is moving at a point and the tools that are becoming available change the landscape in which we're playing. And that challenge for us to change at a university setting is no different than I'm seeing within large corporations. I mean, if I take a traditional defense organization, they want to implement this, but it is very, very slow. Just to get past clearance alone and looking at the fact that we're going to connect something that has secure information on it, that's years in the making. A half a decade would be a wonderful movement in progress. So the fact that we can make some of these changes in a 2, 3, 4, 5-year period is actually, in my mind, it's an optimistic thing. I share that with Barry in that in the center. And I like the fact that we're at least recognizing the fact that those changes are needing to be made and that we're seeing unique strides made globally to be able to answer that. I don't think we know exactly what the right solution will be, and I know we definitely don't know what the final solution will be, because there probably won't be a final solution. The final solution is transformation, and that's a good thing for us all because that means that academically we won't get stale, we won't be stale in industry, and that we should be able to do something better tomorrow than we're doing it today. And I think that's the real benefit of both the collaboration between industry and academia is that we pull and we push and we provide the resources to be able to do it. I know from an academic standpoint, I could not get the leverage with the students without the reality that comes when they go out and do internships and they go out and engage with industry. And we're seeing a lot of graduate students actually coming back out of industry because they recognize the need to know more and they want to be able to engage in this digital transformation in a way that they can't without additional training. And sometimes they're blessed to be able to get that on the job, and sometimes they want to come back and redefine how they're looking at things. And so that in and of itself is one of the places that the university is engaging to help the digital transformation take place, is that cross-disciplinary training. I look at the graduate students that I have. Very few of my graduate students come from a manufacturing engineering discipline. I'm seeing IT students come over to do a smart manufacturing master's. I'm seeing computer science students come over because they want to know more about operational technology and how that affects the digital thread. We're seeing more and more of that engagement from undergraduate to graduate, where students are actually switching disciplines to allow themselves to have the breadth that they need to be able to survive in this world.
Just quickly, if you really want to understand higher ed and the challenges, both as an academic as well as in industry, I recommend 2 books. One is titled Robot Proof. That's by Joseph Aoun. He's actually the president of Northeastern University here in Boston. The other one is The New Education by Kathy Davidson. And both of those books do a really good job of kind of giving you some historical perspective, some of the things I've tried to share briefly here, but also where the path might be towards making the changes necessary that we need to do in higher ed.
Thank you. So as promised, I want to take a pause here for just a minute and give you, our guests, the opportunity to ask questions or respond to some of the things that we've discussed to this point. We've been talking for a little while up here, so if there are questions, we definitely want to give you the opportunity to ask those and participate. Chris?
So, in most of your discussion, Most of your discussion has been predicated on the assumption that the goal of the university is to create job-ready students. Yet the university originally started as the goal was to push the boundaries of knowledge. And we had industry actually doing most of their education within the industry. I mean, you would apprentice to learn how to do the various industries and grow from there. So I was wondering how you guys balance this difference with completely different goals of pushing the forefront of knowledge and making the students ready to enter industry in the way you want.
Well, I was once an academic, but it was so long ago I forgot it. But I do think that's a very profound question, because there's a danger in just having universities train people for jobs, because obviously that's probably too narrow. And the traditional danger in universities is training people with knowledge that has no application really in the real world. So how do you create that balance?
It's a bold statement.
Yeah.
It's a very small number.
Yes, yes, and I'm a fairly black and white guy, you know. So
Send your kids to university.
yeah, well, that's a deeper discussion, maybe more personal, but I would say independent of how we define it, there is a balance between those two goals, and in a lot of ways, even our younger educational processes have been geared to focus towards some outcomes that are much too narrow, rather than the idea of people learning to learn and broader thinking around things. So I just want to reinforce the question, because the question came to me. I'm outside the university area now, and how much of a balance does there need to be, and what does that balance need to look like? So I'm actually reinforcing the question, even though I'm a little bit tilted towards one side of it.
Yeah, I love the question, and my challenge back to you and others that have that question is, why can't we do both? Yeah. I mean, humanity is advanced in many, many ways. Another book I suggest you read is Homo sapien. And why can't things change in some way where we can do both? Aren't we smart enough to do both? So in our curriculum, in our college, I mentioned that it's a convergence of different colleges, including liberal arts. We actually work with our liberal arts colleagues, and our students get a very rich 15-hour sequence of courses that have been created specifically for like STEM majors. They read classic literature and they analyze those things, and they learn about history and context and some of these other things. And at the end of the day, we actually don't think we're preparing our graduates for a specific job. We're preparing them for possibly an industry sector, but it's more about a way of thinking. Because one of our taglines is, as we tried to challenge ourselves to change, is how do you prepare graduates for jobs that don't exist? Because that's the challenge that we have right now. Right. I mentioned earlier, in the good old days, you'd work for GM for 30 years after you got your engineering degree, and you retired and went to Florida or whatever. That's not the way it is anymore. And I think the real challenge to higher ed is, how do we actually go about doing that? Because there's value in both sides of it. And it's not an either-or choice. I think it has to be both, and we do the best we can to get there.
I'd add on to that in saying that one of the differentiating points that we have in looking at the difference between training people for job-specific capabilities versus pushing the boundaries of understanding and learning, that's the difference between undergraduate and graduate degrees as well, to some degree. I mean, undergraduate, we take a nice broad shot. We try to give them the skills that they're going to need to be able to survive in any one of these industries, and we give a little amount of specialization within that. Master's and doctoral work is really where students are going to start pushing the boundaries and diving into depths, and where we would expect them to take the state of the art or the boundaries of that particular knowledge to some new level. I don't think we're looking at deep levels of graduate work pushing preparation for students in digital thread. that's going to be pushing new concepts that will be embedded into this idea of digital thread or any other of the vast areas of knowledge that we're looking at accelerating. And I don't think that's going to change at the university level. That is a place for that to grow and for it to mature and for us to not have bounds on what expectations are for certain things. But we also have to recognize the fact that the undergraduate curriculum and those that are only going to pursue that level of depth in secondary education is going to be the large number of those that are going to be engaging in this world that we're looking at for digital transformation. And I don't know, that's kind of where I see the differences between that when I look at undergraduate and graduate education. But
I also think it goes further than that. So I think we consider the entire ecosystem as well. So you mentioned the word training. I think the universities really play a critical role in preparing students for multiple future careers that they don't know exist, and they will change it many times. But the systemic change, I think, also comes with the schools shifting the way that they prepare kids to enter the universities and preparing them with a broader set of skills and really enabling them to think a little bit differently about digital culture, integration, cross-functional collaboration with other students at a much earlier age. So I think the shift should also be in the school system as well, to prepare kids differently, to learn differently in the university system. But I asked the same question, why not? Why can't you consider having both, the thought leadership, the new knowledge, as well as some of the learning preparation? And certainly, I think the important area for us is really at the undergraduate level, where the students are really investing so deeply in that learning. And then a much lower percentage would go through to an advanced degree then.
If I can add an important fact for me, it's what is important for our students. It's to train them on how to learn. And how to learn this, not only a state of the art, it's important, but also learning by doing and the practice to make the wrong things, the right things, and they increase step by step. And it's very important to push them to open the doors, test some technologies, and validate them or not, and to renew their experimental way of doing things, and to compare after that to the state of the art they have learned in their scientific background and so on and so on. But it's important to balance and mix different way of learning, in fact.